and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I pilot a Jaeger, which is German for that gross alcoholic drink you have to drink while you're in college.
And I'm Matt Freeman, and I'm a kaiju.
That's it?
That's it.
All right, this week we are back to our Deconstructing Director series, breaking down and diving into the films of Guillermo del Toro. This week we are on del Toro's 8th film, the 2013 story, Pacific Rim. Ooh, I've been looking forward to this one for a while.
Yeah, me too, I think.
So we're going to talk all about Pacific Rim. It will be a full spoilers discussion about that movie as we try to see how this links into the overall del Toro filmography. Then we are going to go into our results of last week's Council of Doof vote on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, see how the vote swung in that, if that has been injected into the Doof Cannon, the illustrious list that I haven't bothered to compile yet. But the vote is in, and we'll find out if the audience liked Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, we'll see.
And then, Matt, I want to wrap up this week. I want to chat with you about WandaVision, because since I think a couple weeks ago I recommended WandaVision to you, and since that time you have finally taken the time to sit down and watch all of the released episodes as of this recording date. And so I wanted to have a kind of a spoilery discussion with you about the show, because I think there's a lot to say.
I agree. We will have a good talk about WandaVision.
Yeah, so it will be spoilers for, I believe, the first 6 episodes of WandaVision. By the time this comes out, the new episode will be out, but we will have not watched it yet. So first 6 episodes, will give you a clear spoiler warning before we get there. But that's what the episode is going to be. It sounds like a good one.
All right.
But I'm biased. But let's get into Pacific Rim.
We always thought alien life would come from the stars. But it came from deep beneath the Pacific.
What the hell is going on?
The first kaiju made land in San Francisco. The second attack hit Manila. And then the third one hit Cabo. And then we learned this was not going to stop. In order to fight monsters, we created monsters of our own.
Matt, what is Pacific Rim all about?
As a war between humankind and monstrous sea creatures wages on, a former pilot and a trainee are paired up to drive a seemingly obsolete special weapon in a desperate effort to save the world from the apocalypse.
Would you say they would be canceling the apocalypse?
Sure.
This film was written by del Toro along with Travis Beacham, starring Charlie Hunnam, Idris Elba, Charlie Day, Rinko Kikuchi, and of course, Ron Perlman.
Of course.
Of course. All right, Matt, talk to me about Pacific Rim. What did you think of this movie on this revisit of yours?
It's a very fun movie. It remains a very fun movie. There's something that doesn't feel del Toro about it, and I can't wait to try to figure out what that is while I talk to you today, because I would say that every other del Toro movie that we've seen felt like a del Toro movie in some ways, in a number of ways. And the thing is, this movie has all of the del Toro-isms in it. So I really can't say why I feel that way. I maybe have some mild theories, but it'll be interesting to talk about. Do you feel what I'm saying at all, or?
I do, and I've got some theories on my own on why it feels that way. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
All right. What do you think?
I really enjoyed this movie too. Thank God. I was so worried about this, Matt. If you listen to our last episode on del Toro, leaving Hellboy 2 with such a bad taste in my mouth, I was very worried, because I had very, very fond memories of sitting in the theater and watching this wonderful movie where giant robots punch giant monsters in the face. And I was worried that the problems that I have with a certain kind of del Toro movie were gonna be here, and it was just gonna disappoint me. And you know what? It didn't. I think this is a great movie. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the action, I want to spend so much time talking about the way del Toro chose to film the action, the special effects, and how it's got his stamp all over them in certain ways. It's a wonderfully shot movie. I think it's so fun to watch. there's not good parts about it too. There's some story choices that I don't particularly like in this movie. Some structural choices, just like we've said about a lot of Del Toro films. But overall, I think this was a fun time, and I'm glad he did this.
Yeah, me too. It's a great premise, right? Like,
yeah,
you kind of know. So here's the funny thing is, one might be inclined to say, well, you can't possibly screw up giant robots fighting giant monsters. Like that's just intrinsically going to be a great movie no matter what.
Oh, but you can.
But you can. And in fact, I would argue that it might be particularly playing to Del Toro's strengths that he, nailed it as hard as he did, because I think a lot of his visual style that he has established over the course of his career and a lot of his skills in terms of action directing have really come together perfectly in this movie.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. I do think there's so many movies like this out there that just suck, that just are terrible. I mean, even the Godzilla movies that we've been talking about that have come up on the Doofcast the last few weeks are trying to do a version of this story, and they don't come even close to pulling it off in the way Del Toro pulls it off.
Yeah.
And I think the best example of that, I think the most wonderful example of that is the sequel to this movie, Pacific Rim Uprising, which takes the same concept, the same idea, and makes a whole movie out of it, except there's no Del Toro, and it's awful. It's terrible. Everything that's special about this movie, everything that's special about the way the movie is shot, the way the action is shot, the fun of it is ripped out of it, and you're left with crap. You're just crap. And that was the most disappointing thing that happened to me in a theater in a while, that I knew Del Toro wasn't involved in Pacific Rim Uprising, but I was excited about it because I love the first movie so much. Man, that was a bad movie.
I think one thing this movie really nails is why is this a fun concept? I mean, a lot of it is just looking at these lumbering giant robots, and they're so well done that you can believe that this is what it would really look like. And so a lot of the movie is actually just like the robots walking through the ocean by themselves, and like a long, slow, loving shot of the rain falling on the robot as it walks through the waves, and like there's no fighting, right? It's just, you're just anchoring in this scene and getting the sense of the physicality of it. And I don't know, like that just by itself tickles my brain already, and that's before we even get to the punching.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the detail of the opening sequence when we see them put the suits on for the first time. We see them get into the cockpit for the first time, and the head is, for whatever reason, like 100 feet above the rest of the the robot, so they have to do this very dramatic drop of the head into the rest of the robot, and then it does the spin to lock into place. It's so wonderful. I think Del Toro's management of scale in this movie is one of its greatest triumphs. I think these monsters and these robots constantly feel huge, and he does that in everything. He does that in the way his camera moves between the people and the robot or the monster. He does it in the way that I think any other director, and I know this because this happens in Pacific Rim Uprising, any other director doesn't want the things to move like they're big. It wants them to be fast so the action can be fast, right? It wants the robots to be able to jump around and just slide across things and do all the cool shit that anime does, right?
Right.
But Del Toro is so committed to these things being larger than life that he's fully committed to the idea that, hey, if a giant 100-foot tall thing is gonna pull back and punch someone, it's gonna be slow.
Right.
It's gonna be lumbering. And sometimes there's going to have to be a whole extra jet on its elbow so it can push forward with a little bit more punch. And I love the commitment to that even when at the most exciting action dramatic moments of the story, they're like a slow swing of the sword. It's the commitment to that, I think, is wonderful. And that's part of what makes it feel real and what drives the scale of this thing.
Yeah, right. And the bigger the monster, the slower and more lumbering it is, and that also makes it scarier. And also not just scarier, but like you just buy it. Like you have to buy it for this sort of thing to work. So I wanted to say, like, I watched this movie with my kids, and they really were into it. They really enjoyed. I mean, to whatever degree they understood the story, I think they thought it was fine. And then the fights, they were just like absolutely wrapped. Like it's actually a pretty rare movie where I will actually be like, are they in the room with me? And like look around and like realize like, yeah, they're in the room. They've just been silently watching the movie for like 5 minutes straight, which is, you know, several hours in adult time. And yeah, they were totally into it. Yeah, I want to say obviously, but it's like, no, I mean, they watch a lot of movies that are really special effects heavy. So in a sense, they're inured to that. Like it's no longer enough to just be like, look, guys, it's a cool CGI battle between CGI things. They're bored of that. They've been bored of that since they were like 5 or 4.
Yeah, because that's been their whole life.
Yeah, but this, I mean, especially actually the scene where the young woman character, but like in her child form in the memory, is running from the monster as it's destroying the city and chasing her.
Mm-hmm.
They were like terrified, and you know, it was kind of charming because they rarely react that strongly to anything in a movie, but they thought it was so scary because it was a kid, I guess. But just overall, the fact, you know, anyway, to reiterate, it actually worked on them. They actually bought it. They bought into it emotionally. They bought into the physicality of it. They thought it was cool. They thought it was scary. And that, to me, you know, that always counts for several points for me when it's working on me and it's also working on my kids. And therefore it's working on several different levels at once.
Yeah, totally. It's remarkable. Like I said this the first time I saw it, and it's true every time I rewatch this movie. It makes me feel like a kid again. It makes me feel like your son. You're a 7-year-old kid that's watching this thing that you played with your toys, but you're seeing it on the screen in the way that you imagined it, in this way that it feels giant. I mean, you compare this to like Transformers, right? And look, I think Michael Bay is a genius. Transformers series is a work of art. I'm kind of half joking with that, but I think the attention to detail here and the attention to the physicality of feeling the blows and feeling the power of these things is so key to wrapping you into the world. And it's just like, you can just tell that Del Toro spent so much time. I mean, the fact that each and every one of these Jaegers is designed differently. They move differently. They walk differently. They attack differently. Like the Russian one is this, like it says earlier on that it's the heaviest Jaeger in the bunch. It moves like it's heavier. Mm-hmm. You have the Australian one, which I think is supposed to be the fastest Jaeger that's ever existed. You can tell it moves faster. Gypsy Danger, I think, moves. I think what Del Toro said in an interview was he wanted him to be like a gunslinger. He wanted him to be like John Wayne, and so he kind of moves with this swagger, and it's also a swagger that's matched by its pilot. The way Charlie Hunnam walks is the way Gypsy Danger walks, and the time to craft a clear difference in the style and look of these robots and the style and look of all these different monsters they're fighting. Each and every one of the kaiju is different and they fight differently. And so like the fight between Gypsy and the ape looking kaiju is like a boxing match.
Yeah.
And then the fight between him and the pterodactyl looking one is totally different. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just this wonderful detail that makes it so it's not just, okay, now we're moving on to the fight portion again and we kind of turn our brain off and just like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the screen. No, because each one of these fights is different. Each one of these fights has different stakes. There's different things they're trying to do.
I think that's a lot of the fun of it, is like the different monsters have different abilities that sort of like change over the course of the fight. Mm-hmm. And then maybe this time you're in the ocean, maybe this time you're in a city. I mean, I just, you know, God, like the moment when Gypsy Danger is walking toward the monster down the street, dragging a giant cargo ship.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's like, that's the thing where it's like, that wasn't, you know, necessary. That's just cool. That's just a cool visual. And I do like what you said about the way that robot moves being like the way the pilot moves, or in fact, you could say the pilots, because the movie goes out of its way to show you that. I forgot all the characters' names. Sorry, but the woman who becomes his partner, like they have the same fighting style.
That's Mako.
Yeah, Mako. Yes, that's right. So like the Jaeger fights with the fighting style that they both have. Like you can kind of just see like, oh yeah, that's how they would move if they were giant. Sure, I buy that. You know, and again, it's better than, you know, if it were like Gundam something where the thing is jetting around and moving in these physically unrealistic ways that are completely decoupled to people. So another note on that is like the interior of the Jaeger makes no sense at all, but works perfectly. it works perfectly in film, right? Because like in reality, what you would almost have to do for something. Okay. So first of all, the idea that you need to share the neural load between two people, none of this makes any sense. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
No, but I mean, we can keep going, but we need to talk about the drift for a very long time because
Sure.
I think it's really important to what this movie is doing.
It's very important thematically, obviously, but what you would really do if you had to fight with a giant robot, if you had no other choice, is you would have one pilot and then they'd be super securely strapped in and enshrined in as much steel as you possibly could, and they would operate it through like either controls that they operate with their hands or maybe some kind of neural system, but they wouldn't actually have to move their bodies. But this movie is like, no, that would be horrible movie making because you'd be cutting to a picture, you'd be cutting to a person sitting in a chair, which is the most boring thing in the world, which is what they do in anime usually, by the way.
Yeah, it sucks. It's terrible. Fuck anime.
Yeah. But of course, in this movie, the people are like what's happening inside the Jaeger is practically just as dynamic and interesting as what's happening outside the Jaeger generally. And like the thing's getting damaged and you see the damage is reflected on the inside too. And people are getting injured when the Jaeger gets injured. And so like it really humanizes the combat where it's not just, yes, it is the monsters punching each other, but also you see the consequence of the punching inside the cabin on their faces. You have to use your empathy there, and so that's like I think a really necessary part of why the battles work and why they feel like they've been successfully dramatized.
Yeah, I mean, when you see Gypsy Danger pull back for a big punch, you see Charlie Hunnam pull back for a big punch, and there's like effort and like oomph.
Yeah,
because of your human character. I think this is one of these things that I think you don't think about very often when you think about movie making, but just like the moment to moment decisions of plotting the action of the scenes, when to cut into Gypsy Danger and show the humans and when to cut back out. And, the choices made throughout the sequence of when we're going to go inside and focus on the individuals and versus when we're going to go outside and focus on the Jaeger itself as a character. Because I think that's an interesting thing about this movie is that, yes, we have Raleigh and we have Mako, and those are two characters, but also the Jaeger, Gypsy Danger, is a character on its own, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are moments like when his arm gets ripped off, you're like, oh,
yeah,
I don't want the cool robot man to get his arm ripped off. And I mean, that doesn't mean that Charlie Hunnam's arm just got ripped off. Although I do love that he cries out in pain when it happens.
Yeah.
As if there's pain sensors.
Right.
I guess because the neural link.
It's the drift. Yeah. It's the drift, man.
But I think it's just one of those things that, like, if you just think about, like, broadly, if you're trying to choreograph this fight scene, just knowing when the right moments to cut and zoom in on the human characters versus to keep it wide, I think that's more challenging than it looks. And I do think that's something that I think this movie felt like it always did it at the right times. I never felt frustrated by a cut to Charlie Hunnam because I was missing some robot action on the outside. Like it always felt like this is the right time to cut. This is the right time to humanize it. This is the right time to zoom back in on our characters.
Yeah.
Versus, for example, Power Rangers, which is not even close to as adept at this, where it's just cutting all over the place and it's just silly.
And then when it cuts to the Power Rangers, it cuts to people in masks who aren't really moving, which is not giving you anything to go on, right? And there's no sign of danger, and like it's this thing. It was very clever. It was a very clever way they did everything. I will say the one thing that it kind of, I don't know, I guess this is a complaint, is like sometimes the shaky cam inside the Jaeger was so bad that I just could not tell what was happening, and it would be sort of extended like that. So, you know, the thing gets hit and then you cut to the inside and it's just like someone is taking the camera and violently shaking it back and forth as hard as they can. I'm just like, okay, I just see like a red blur, which is maybe the impact that they wanted to have on the viewer, but I kind of feel like I was supposed to get more out of it than that.
Sure. I mean, I think that is one interesting choice in general in this direction, is the way, especially in the big battle scenes, that it's basically all CG.
Mm-hmm.
Del Toro chose to position the camera, quote unquote, in very realistic places.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you always kind of felt that the camera was like, we see again and again that there are helicopters always kind of constantly flying around these mechs, and the camera is always, if it's an overhead view like that, it always feels like it's on a helicopter. Like, it feels like it's moving around a little bit. It's not exactly stable. When so many of his shots are on the ground, when you're like a person looking up at the two things fighting each other. So he always kind of like, he has basically unlimited freedom to put the camera wherever he wants, but he makes it a element of the scene. Like, when you're in the water, the camera will like dip under the waves and come back up, and it'll have a little bit of water on it.
Yeah.
You know, like he put the camera in the movie in a way that he didn't need to, and I think that is part of the realism of it.
Yeah.
Part of what connects you and grounds you that this is really happening. And I think another choice in that is like, none of these battles happen during the day. They are all at night. It is usually raining. And that is another part of like, I think that's the gothic part of Del Toro coming out a little bit.
That's interesting. Yeah. I feel like the camera doesn't draw attention to itself.
Mm-mm.
Like it tries to be like, I think like you were saying, like you can imagine that the camera is positioned on a building nearby watching this happen, and then we cut to a different location, and clearly there's no actual cameraman there, but mentally, you know, mostly we're looking up at the Jaeger, right?
Yeah.
Not always. Certainly not always, because sometimes we're decidedly not. We're looking down on it. But it seems like if we're going for that lumbering effect, then we're looking up at the Jaeger, up at the monsters, to emphasize how big and weighty they are.
Yeah, definitely. One of my favorite shots in the movie is actually in the prologue when Raleigh appears on the beach where he's walked his damaged Jaeger after losing his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to the scene where we see him kind of from above laying on the beach. And then the camera like slowly pulls back and pulls back and pulls back. And it pulls back so far until we see the whole Jaeger lying on the beach as well in that same scene. And that's how you emphasize scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
By constantly transitioning between the two different scales and making that the transition loud a little bit. Like the transition calls attention to itself a little bit here, because it's like, oh wow, we're really pulling back here. Look how tiny Charlie Hunnam is. Oh god, this thing is huge.
Yeah.
And I feel like the movie does that pretty consistently. We're always kind of mixing in the frame a small person to contrast with the big monster or the big robot.
Yeah, at least for like maybe the first half of the movie until our brain kind of buys how big these things are.
Sure.
I do think a lot of the movie is spent selling you on, you know, mentally buying into the idea that this is a giant thing that I'm looking at, actually.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I paid attention to this time it is not till 67 minutes into the movie that we get our first real Jaeger kaiju fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't include the very brief one in the prologue, but that's pretty far into a movie before, you know, you would think they want to get into that as soon as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, this may be a criticism. I don't know if I can fairly call this a solid criticism, but I feel like it does take its time in a way that verges upon boring. I don't think I really like, it's not like I was totally not into the characters at all. That would be a false statement. But I also like it didn't land particularly hard for me when you have all these like heroic sacrifices at the end. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't like, well, this is garbage. But like, you know, most of Del Toro's movies, I think, have landed for me. That's an interesting point. I don't know if they have actually. Like, I don't know if that's his strong suit. I don't know if his strong suit is is connecting dramatically with the final moments. Like as I'm thinking through, I'm like, well, there've definitely been a few in there where I had kind of the same complaint where I'm like, the story wasn't quite focused enough for me to really care about what happened to the characters at the end. And this is one movie where I think the same criticism applies.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he's doing with the characters, I think he's trying to be very broad here. I think this is a movie where he's taking two of his favorite things of all time, right? He's taking the kaiju, the Japanese kaiju films he watched growing up, and then he's taking the mech films he loved growing up, and he's kind of mashing these two genres together. And so he's building these characters that are almost more archetype than they are person.
Mm-hmm.
And the result in that is that they're so broad that you don't really feel a lot for them. But I almost think like it works because I care more about Gypsy Danger than I care about Raleigh Beckett, you know?
Right.
And I will say that I do think part of the problem here is that I just don't think Charlie Hunnam is a very good actor, and I don't like him in this movie very much at all. I think he's the very milquetoast kind of protagonist. Like he's the guy from Hellboy, right? And except he's the protagonist this time. He doesn't have a Ron Perlman's Hellboy to kind of drown him out. I just don't. I wish this was Mako's movie. I think the movie would be better if this was her movie and not his movie.
Yeah, I mean, he was sort of cast because he's the everyman, but he was way too much of the everyman to the point where
he's just one of those people that just looks like a movie star. Like he has the look of the white male, relatively good looking movie star thing, and he just doesn't have the charisma to back up the looks. He really doesn't, and I feel bad because I'm sure Charlie Hunnam is a wonderful guy, but I've not enjoyed him in any of the things I've seen him in.
You know, and I don't know if I can say this for sure, but I feel like maybe part of that is on the direction, because you know, how many quiet moments with Raleigh Beckett do we get? And maybe we get plenty of them and I'm just really bored during them, and so I tune out. But I feel like that's part of the problem, is like we don't really I don't feel like I know who this guy is, which is weird because we do spend most of the movie with him. So maybe that is just acting. I don't know.
I just think it's very broad and archetypal in a way that doesn't connect on an emotional level. Like who he is the hotshot who got taken down a peg, the hotshot rookie who got taken down a peg when he lost his brother, that has to rejoin the team as the wizened person and has to like learn how to trust people again. You know, like these are very like broad character types. Mako is the sheltered young girl with natural talent who needs their overbearing father to let them experience the world. You know, like these are very, very broad characters, and it seems like they're almost designed that way. Like the Australian guys, you got the wizened old father and his hotshot son that needs a kick in the ass. Like every single one of these people is super, super, super broad. And I just think, I think that's by design. I do. I think he wanted to tap into a very specific kind of storytelling. And this goes back to what you were talking about at the beginning of the show, where you feel like this feels different from other Del Toro movies. And I think it's because he is purposefully trying to do a certain thing here. He's trying to tap into these two separate types of movies and pull from them in very specific ways.
Uh-huh.
And it makes it feel a little bit different. And I think it works broadly because it works enough to make me care about the giant robot punching the giant monster. But yeah, I'm not going to like, Raleigh Beckett is not the best character in the world ever. And I think that's a calculated risk in this kind of thing, right? Like you want it to be broad. You want it to be big. You don't want to mire the movie. You don't want to overcomplicate the movie with the character work, because at the end of the day, we're buying our ticket because we want to see giant robots. But you need to have some of it in there. And I think he just made a calculated decision to focus more on one thing than the other. And that leaves the movie kind of on a character emotional level a little bit flat.
Yeah, I'm kind of rotating this around in my head, and I think my conclusion is like it's fine. It's like not every movie can be Blade Runner 2049 with its like subtlety and intricate character work and 90-second shots on a person's face as they're processing something. Like this is not that movie, and that's fine. I think there's a good reason why the first part of this conversation that we're having was just us talking glowingly about the giant robot fights, because I think that was honestly the point of the movie.
Yes.
And the character stuff, he's a good filmmaker and he's a good storyteller, so he's like, all right, well, you will only care about the robot fights if you care somewhat about the characters. And so he did that, and that did work. I just don't care very much. I care some.
Yeah, I think some is the perfect way to describe that. And I think like what he's trying to do with the drift, I do think is interesting. I think this idea of like, I mean, it's this wonderful symbolic through line that runs through the movie about humanity having to work together to overcome odds, right? Like it's everywhere in this movie. You have the two separate scientists that are completely different types of scientists. They believe completely different things, and they need to learn to work together and put their powers together to figure out the puzzle. The drift system is two people coming together. The Jaeger program in general is people from all over the world kind of teaming up to take down the bad guys. Like you have representatives of cultures from all over the world kind of coming together to do this. And so the drift system is kind of this very simple, because again, I think this simple is the name of the game in this movie. He's not trying to be too complex, but the drift is a very simple but very effective way of drilling that metaphor home, that okay, well, these are two people that literally need to share the same mind space in order to defeat the bad guy.
Yeah.
I do wish, and see, I say this, it'll take away from the big monster fight, so I don't want to do it, but I wish the drift was dramatized a little bit more. Like, the thing about it is, you have that wonderful moment that I do like in the middle of the movie where Mako and Raleigh drift together for the first time, and they fall out of alignment, and she goes into her past trauma, and she gets a handle on it eventually with his help. I wish the movie like came back to that, you know, like it just feels like that's an unfinished beat.
Right.
Like we have this, she's struggling with this thing with her past, he's struggling with his past, and it is putting them out of alignment, and they dodged a bullet in this moment in training. But what if it comes up again when the stakes are real? And the movie doesn't really seem interested in going there.
There's like this moment where he kind of stands up for her. But that's it. That's all we get in the way of quote unquote closure. It's, structurally, I don't know if I want to be at the point of like proposing changes, because I don't actually think that this would work better necessarily, but I can't help but notice that this movie has a lot of characters. And, like Charlie Day playing Dr. Newton Geisler, he gets a lot of screen time, actually.
He does.
And
this Charlie Day.
Charlie Day is being very comedic, and it really kind of shifts the tone of the movie, actually, in a significant way. I think this is something that we've noticed about Del Toro movies is a tendency to have kind of a comedy B plot to offset a serious or action A plot, and I don't know if I love it in this movie. Like it's entertaining. And his performance is very, extremely energetic in a way that's fun to watch. And the idea that you're going to mind meld with your enemy to learn from them is, I suppose, connects with the themes of the fact that they're mind melding with each other to learn from each other. I guess.
I don't know.
Yeah, like that's the thing is, I guess my suggestion would be all of that time we spent with Charlie Day. While it did have some fun parts to it, I think that it kind of interferes with the tone of what the movie's trying to do. And I think that it takes up a lot of time that could have otherwise been used to actually have a plot with our main characters. Like they sort of seem to have a romantic plot line, but that is also like utterly surface level and then truncated. And you're just like,
I'm so glad they didn't actually kiss at the end, because their bond is beyond just romance. It's like that is one thing that I wish the movie would dramatize a little bit more is how, like, the movie tells you that the connection between the two people is super intimate, right? They're in each other's brains, but I don't feel like we ever really did something with that. Like, I mean, the whole thing with Raleigh is he was with this hotshot with his brother. His brother died. And because he felt like he could never trust anyone the way he trusted his brother, who he lost, he disappeared from the world. And he just goes and builds this completely ineffectual wall that, side note, it's hilarious how ineffectual this wall is. It's fucking hilarious. They spent so much money building. And this is before Trump, by the way. This is before Donald Trump's wall. So this isn't even Del Toro making a cheeky Trump thing. He's just talking about how politicians oh, here's the problem, build a wall, and it's just completely ineffective. Anyway, he disappears from the world, and like he gets called back into this thing, and he needs to learn to trust again. He needs to learn to find someone he can trust, because trust is so important to this whole thing. You're letting someone into your head in a way beyond any kind of relationship you've ever had. And I feel like he just does it. He's just like, this is the one, got it. Yeah. There's no struggle there.
That's the, you know, I want to reference a conversation that we had the other day on the Dark Tower podcast, which won't work at all because our listeners don't overlap well enough. But like there's kind of no like honesty in character here. Like you point out, like I don't buy him, you know, changing so quickly from being a hotshot into being you know, completely running away from it and then immediately turning on a dime and going back to being a hotshot and wanting to, and like, why does he like Mako? Like, what is, nothing is set up properly. I think I am leaning more into my idea of like the movie tried to be a bit too broad with this idea that we're going to have this elaborate B plot with Charlie Day, where he goes into Hong Kong and meets Ron Perlman, and there's all these comic relief scenes, and you're like, okay, this was all time we could have been using to establish this relationship a little bit deeper.
Yeah, see, the thing is, I love that stuff, though. I do just agree. It feels, I love it on its own. Put into the overarching movie, it's tough, and I don't know. I struggle. Like, so I think this is supposed to be the kaiju part of the movie, right? I think, like, once again, this is Del Toro taking two different kind of movies and kind of jamming them together to make this one thing, to take mechs and take kaiju and make a mech verse kaiju movie. And I think Charlie Day is part of that kaiju story. And I like the world building that happens there. Like, I love learning about all the different bits of how the world has kind of changed around the existence of these monsters, and how like they're harvested, and there's this whole black market, and what things do what things. And I think that's all really interesting, and I like it, but it does take away from the core of the movie. I agree with you.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a fun movie because it's a fun movie to talk about, I should say. I mean, it's a fun movie, full stop, and then it's a fun movie to talk about because I feel like it does work. I'm just like, it's not how I would have done it. And then it's like, okay, well, how would I have done it? And then that invites kind of a bunch of, you know, thinking that you can do. But I don't know that any of my ideas would be better than the movie that we got. So
sure.
So maybe I should stop complaining and just appreciate let the 7-year-old boy within me appreciate character names like Stacker Pentecost.
Idris Elba is wonderful in this movie because I do think Idris Elba is the one guy who knows exactly what this movie is and knows when to go big, because that final speech is kind of absurd. Like the I'm going to cancel the apocalypse. It's kind of an absurd speech to give, but it just works in the moment because Elba sells it, I think, because he's such a good actor, and it's perfect.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of this does come down to acting, because I did actually feel it when his character and the Australian son character sacrificed themselves to give Gypsy Danger a chance. I did care about that, and they get way less screen time and way less characterization. I did not care at all when Raleigh was jettisoning Mako. I'm just like, yeah, is he gonna live? I don't really care either way.
Man, it's Charlie Hunnam, man. No offense, Charlie, if you're listening, but he's just so dull. He just really is.
He's generic actor product. I'm sorry.
And one of the things that frustrates me about the movie so much is that like so much of the movie is just him screaming, Mako.
Yeah.
I don't know this actress, and I don't know, like, but she seems like she doesn't get to say a lot. I think she's Japanese. I think she was born in Japan. So maybe her English just isn't that good, where they tried to limit her lines. So it's always Charlie yelling at her and very rarely her saying things. I don't know. Just have her speak Japanese and translate it. I don't even care. I don't even care. But it's just a lot of her, like Charlie describing things to her and not a lot of her saying things. Which didn't help to me understand what their bond was.
Yeah, right.
While we're on the complaining train,
okay,
I got to talk about prologues, Matt. I got to talk about prologues.
Got to talk about prologues. Because
this movie has a 16-minute prologue, and I don't like it. Okay, there are things about this prologue I like very much. I like the time it takes to show, like we already talked about, them to get into the suits, and like the first time we see Gypsy Danger walk out there and like walking out there with the swagger of people that have been doing this for a long time and have gotten pretty fucking good at it. This is a moment in the movie where our characters are winning. And I actually love the idea that this whole movie takes place in a moment where they're not winning anymore. I love that the movie doesn't start the first time the kaiju appear. I love that the movie doesn't start at the beginning of the Jaeger program. I love the choice to tell this story at the tail end of everything when they're losing, and they're as just a self-described resistance force and not an army anymore. Love that choice. But the decision to kind of tell everything that came before that in this very long extended prologue, I just couldn't help think, there's got to be a more dramatic way to give this information to the viewer. Like, imagine if the first time we meet Charlie Hunnam's Raleigh, we meet him as the guy he becomes after all this stuff. We don't know that he was the swaggering Jaeger pilot, the hot shot. We don't know that's who he was. We just know him as this quiet guy who seemingly doesn't care whether he lives or dies because he's working on this giant wall, and that we know people have died before. He's dirty. People try to talk to him and he's not really talking back. Yeah. And then we're reintroduced to this world. And as we get to learn about who this person was before and what happened to him that made him this way, I just think that's so much more dramatically interesting than just being told it and then seeing where he is later.
Yeah, I mean, while we're being broad and just trying to patch the movie, like you can do the sort of slightly skew archetype from there, where you meet the character and they seem to be a nobody, and then some emergency happens and they spring into action and do what needs to be done. And then it's like, who is this guy? And then you realize who he was before, right? Like that's another way of playing that. But as it is, I mean, just basic storytelling problem actually is your character needs to have agency, and his character is just buffeted around by the plot. His brother dies, he becomes useless, and then they come and they seek him out to try to make him a Jaeger pilot, and then he's like, okay, sure.
Yeah, that's my biggest complaint with the movie is I don't buy that guy saying yes.
Yeah.
In that moment, I don't buy it. You have not convinced me that why this guy is going back to everything he ran away from.
Yeah.
And I guess you could argue it's because he sees on the TV screen that this wall he's building is completely worthless and not doing anything. And like there is this little, I do love, like, wouldn't it, the moment where he's watching the Jaeger or the kaiju break through the wall that he's just been building, and we see the Jaeger pilots, the cocky Australian kid brag about how they took him down, and it's like our 10th kill. We're the best Jaeger ever. Like, and you see this look. I think this is a good performance. Here, I'm gonna compliment Charlie Hunnam. Here we go. You see this look on his face that is half heartbroken and half a little bit jealous. He's a little bit jealous of that because that used to be him. And imagine how much more dramatically satisfying it would be if you, the viewer, see that look and are like, huh, why do you feel that way? And then we learn as the movie goes on, oh, it's because that used to be him. This guy he's looking at on TV right now, that was him. And he's not that person anymore. I don't know. Just like, this is my complaint with prologues in general, is 9 times out of 10, I feel like the information delivered in the prologue would be better and more dramatically interesting to be delivered at some other point in the actual movie.
It's also really weird to do your refusing the call beat at that point in the story. Like that just isn't normal. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't like the prologue either, but I don't know. There's a lot of stuff where I'm just like, I don't love it, but I don't know what I would suggest to fix it. And it's kind of fine the way it is. So.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest issue with this is that like the action sequences in this movie are some of the best monster mech action sequences I've ever seen, ever.
Yeah.
And if you're telling me any changes to story to make the story work a little bit better on me would have taken resources away from nailing the shit out of that stuff, then my choice is obvious. Keep the movie exactly the way it is, because those beats work really, really, really well.
Yeah, I think so. I've been trying not to say it this whole time, Scott, but I do have to just nitpick about how this movie is so painful to watch for, anyone who has an engineering bent, because she tried to pick up a cargo ship like a sword. It's just gonna like fold like if you tried to pick up a big piece of foil or something. Like it doesn't have that much tensile or sheer strength. And for that matter, it's unlikely that the Jaegers would either. But you know what? I don't care. It's fine.
Sorry, what, were you done?
I am actually. I didn't want to, but I had to.
Matt, he uses the ship as a fucking bat. It's awesome. And I don't care about anything you just said. I don't care.
I think here's the thing. We all kind of know that it's impossible to build a robot that big, and thus you just have to be like, but what if it wasn't? And then that's it. That's the movie.
Well, there's moments when they're like in the middle of the ocean, and you're like, the ocean's pretty deep.
What are they standing on? Yeah.
And they got little floaties on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of little moments where it's like they turn on a jetpack, and you're like, where's the fuel for that? And how is it powerful enough to lift something that big? I mean, like a rocket. Fuck it. Who cares?
Yeah. Who cares? I mean, just like these things would be so heavy that walking down a street in a city would just collapse.
Yeah.
The entire infrastructure of the city street that lies underneath it. Like none of it's practical.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Well, one thing that they sort of did, but I wanted to see more of, and this is just the tiniest nitpick ever, is like, realistically, if you're fighting a giant monster with a giant robot, like every time the two of them touch, there's going to be horrific damage to both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would have been cool if like you can only even punch it so many times before like your fists begin to crumple. I think that would have been a neat touch, but I don't really care that it's not like it hurts the movie that it wasn't there. It's just like if I were in charge, I would make it so that like even the act of hitting the thing is going to damage whatever part of the robot you use to hit it, because they're just hitting each other so hard.
Yeah. But that we don't want to see our Gypsy Danger, which is decorated like a World War II plane. I don't know if you noticed that. Like it has the spray paint on the chest like it's a World War II bomber. God, there's so much good detail in this movie. This movie is riddled with amazing detail in everything.
I didn't really think of it that way, but now that you mention it, I mean, it kind of has these crests along its back that look like wings, even though it never actually uses them to fly.
The other detail I like is that like, because this whole program was made because the conventional weaponry they were using to beat these things was destroying as much of the city as the monsters themselves were. They're like not built to have a lot of guns on them, like by design almost, right? Like Gypsy Danger has a couple plasma fists and then a sword, right?
Yeah.
And the one has like chest rockets a little bit, but like most of them aren't built to have like shit tons of missiles and guns and that kind of shit. It's mostly hand-to-hand combat because they're like trying to minimize like damage to the city.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, it plays into the ideas.
One more thing to say before we wrap this up. The theme song fucking owns.
Yes.
So good.
Yes, it does.
I wish we could play some of it here without immediately being screamed at by copyright protection, but sadly we cannot do that. But the main song owns so hard.
It does. Absolutely.
I believe it was, let's see if I can find it. I was trying to pull it up while I was talking, but IMDb is so terrible about this, where it puts stuff. It's the same guy who did the music for Game of Thrones. So I think it's like, he probably wrote the Game of Thrones intro, which is also a banger. So good job.
Yes. I was humming that all day. So I agree completely.
It does exactly what a score needs to do, which is just make you into the moment, build the triumph and suspense of the moment as Gypsy Danger picks up that tanker that absolutely would hold its shape, and swings it.
All right.
Smack that guy right in the face.
Mm-hmm.
So much fun. Loved Pacific Rim. Good job. I really do want to emphasize, as much as all our critiquing and complaining in the back half of this episode showed, this is only a film that Guillermo del Toro could make, and it only would have been this good because of him. Like we talk about auteur filmmaking, and yes, this was a movie that was made with thousands of people. The special effects team itself was probably hundreds and hundreds of people, but this guy was involved in every aspect of it. I watched some of the special features on the DVD, so I know this is not a here's my vision, go do it, and come to me back with the finished product. He was there on every little bit, every creature design, every movement of the creatures. He was there making the decisions.
Yeah. I just think there's a thing with Del Toro that has come out over the last however many of these that we've done, where amazing visuals, we always praise the visuals, amazing attention to detail in that regard. But we're always, when it comes to the story, we're always like, yeah, I guess it was pretty good. And then we complain about it for half an hour. And we're never like, oh, it was terrible. I guess maybe with Mimic, we didn't love that too much, but that wasn't his fault. But it's always just like, not how I would have done that, Mm-hmm. I think it makes for maybe good, maybe frustrating conversations, because I rarely know how to fix it. I just know that I didn't love it, Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it feels shallow and off in some fundamental ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I still really enjoy the movies. Yeah. I really do.
Yeah.
And I think kind of transitioning to what our next film is going to be, I think it's going to be a very interesting one, because our next film is Crimson Peak, which is kind of, to me, a return to the smaller, focused character stories that Del Toro did with some of his earlier works, with Kronos, with The Devil's Backbone, and with Pan's Labyrinth to a certain extent. It is a smaller movie. It is a more intimate movie. And I'm wondering if, because of that, his focus will be more on that story, and if we'll appreciate that portion more in that movie than we have in a film like this.
Uh-huh.
I have not seen Crimson Peak since it came out in theaters. I adored the movie. I think it's beautiful and wonderful, and I am very interested to see how I feel this time around.
And I have not seen it at all, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Awesome. So that will be our next Del Toro, and actually our penultimate Del Toro movie. We've only got 2 left, so Crimson Peak coming up soon. Do you have anything else you wanted to say about this movie before we move on, Matt?
Nope. Really fun movie. Enjoyed it despite all of the whinging that I did. And if you haven't seen it, check it out.
So much fun. Just like, I'm gonna go ahead and watch Godzilla versus Kong, but there's just no way they do it as good as this movie did it. There's just no way.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I guess, yeah. One final thought is like, I love that they had the monsters all be weird and different and constantly surprising you. Like, oh, it went from being like a snake thing into being like a bat thing. That was such an awesome moment. Like the 7-year-old inside me and the 7-year-old sitting beside me were both equally like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, what a moment when the thing unfolds the wings, right?
Yeah.
And you're just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I also really loved when the Category 5 thing like did the spinny wind up with its tentacles. That was badass.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, Pacific Rim. Go watch it.
Doof.
Matt, it's time to talk about The Council again. We've got to talk about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a movie that we both proudly and possibly arrogantly declared a perfect movie last week. And we put the vote out to our listeners, and they agreed. Almost perfectly agreed. We had one dissenting vote of all of our votes that said no. And our dissenting vote was an individual who dissents, but seems rather uncertain in their dissension. They said, I voted no, but it was a weak and probably wrong vote. Yes, it was.
Yes.
I haven't seen this movie in a while. I probably would have voted yes if I had seen the movie in recent years, but it's not in my memory as a perfect movie. So we, to that individual, go watch the movie.
Yep. Go rewatch it, understanding that it's a great movie. And, I think it's easy to not notice that it's a great movie. That's one thing about it is it's unassuming. It's a very unassuming movie. I think a lot of Zemeckis movies are like that, actually, where you're watching a great movie, but you're not like conscious of, I am watching a great movie. Yeah, I'm so glad that everyone agreed with us. I'm so glad that the movie is in the canon now, and therefore will be regarded as one of the best movies of all time forever.
We actually had one of our listeners put together a spreadsheet of all the movies that are in the canon. You know, that thing I've been promising to do for literally half a year and I haven't done yet. Well, one of our listeners, Divine Bovine on Reddit, did that for us in like 3 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's nice.
So thank you, Divine Bovine. We actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 movies in the canon now. There have only been 2 failures. The first one was the Castlevania television show, which that was the last time we did TV shows. And the other one was Redline, the one anime that I liked. Everyone else didn't, but everything else has been in. So you want me to go down a quick list of these, Matt? So we can remind ourselves here?
Sure.
So we have Primer, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Mad Max Fury Road, Stardust, Akira, Bahubali, The Princess Bride, Starship Troopers, The Prestige, and now Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's a pretty good list.
I'm so happy with this list because it's what I want from the Doof list, where it's a bunch of weird stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's you got some obvious all-time classics in there like Mad Max Fury Road and Spider-Man and Akira, and then you got some weird one-offs like Stardust, like Bahubali, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Yeah, like the movies that I don't think you'd see on lists like this.
Yeah.
I love it so much. So we will continue to add to this list, and one day I will publish like a whole big list version of the list where you can like read a little bit about the movies and see the links to the episode. And one day that'll happen. It's become a thing now that I really don't even want to do it anymore because like it's been so long.
No, Scott, you'll do it next week.
Yeah, I will definitely get that done.
There you go.
Doof.
All right, Matt, it's time for us to check in on our Disney Plus show, which is apparently a thing that we do. Every new Disney Plus show, we have a segment on the show where we talk about it for a little bit. So I want to talk to you about WandaVision. So I kind of tried to sell you on WandaVision a couple weeks ago. You have watched it now. So what do you think about WandaVision? Spoilers. Let's make sure we say spoilers for the first 6 episodes of WandaVision.
I liked it a lot. Yeah. It's very ambitious. It's very weird. It's trying to do some very interesting things I think it's doing those things very competently, and it does a very fun thing where it sort of is swinging between comedy, like genuinely amusing comedy, and like creepy Twilight Zone horror, which I'm just loving this mix. I'm loving this kind of tonal just mixture. Really liking it. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple things I wanted to talk to you about before that I couldn't because you hadn't seen it yet. The first is I love the Twilight Zone-y aspects of it. I think my favorite episode is still the very first one, where you're just kind of thrust into this Dick Van Dyke sitcom. You have no idea what the fuck's going on, and then every so often something is pushing against the edges of this thing, and it just feels really weird and uncomfortable. I think when the guy starts choking,
yeah,
in the middle of that dinner scene, like it's been just this very standard, absolutely true to sitcom of its type, even in like, not even in like style, but in like filming style. They're using the same lenses. They're cutting it the same way. They're lighting it it's so good. Our actors are performing exactly the way they need to do. And then suddenly this thing injects in it, and it creeps you the fuck out.
Yeah.
And it's so good. And I don't think the show for me has quite lived up to that moment in my head yet. The thing that I thought was going to happen when I talked to you last absolutely is happening. The thing where the sitcom version of the show is becoming a smaller and smaller piece of the overall show as it goes is absolutely happening.
Yeah.
I'm not as bothered by it as I thought I was going to be, but I do feel like it's less than what it was in the first couple of episodes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I enjoy the Avengers stuff, and so I don't feel like, oh, this is a tragedy. Like, I feel like it's a fun continuation of this wild and crazy thing that they have been doing, and I look forward to seeing like what's the next movement going to be. It's entirely possible that this thing kind of meanders into a ditch and you stop caring. But right now, like, despite the fact that, yes, it has kind of left behind the sitcom tone, I still care. Like, I'm very interested in the mystery of like what's happening. I'm very like into what's happening. I think this is like the first time I've actually cared about Vision as a character, because like he's so confused and like understandably kind of upset and angry, and kind of feels betrayed, and like there's just so much going on with him, and it's written well, it's acted well.
Yeah.
You're kind of always on edge about Wanda, where like she's suffering a lot, but you don't know like to what degree she's self-aware about what's happening. And like I think that works. I don't know, just like everything's working for me, even though I agree with you that it's in some sense a shame that we moved away from the sitcom stuff, but I don't know if that's a thing that could have been kept going forever. I guess I just have no real complaints. I'm really enjoying it.
I don't know if you can keep up with the first couple episodes and actually tell a story. I just don't think you can. And so like I see it as an absolute necessity. They had to do it, but I'm still a little bummed about it. Although I will say the Malcolm in the Middle pastiche that they did this past week was just perfect.
Yeah.
I watched that show so much as a kid, and it just like felt like being in the 90s again. Just everything they did with it, the way they shot it. Like they make these, you can tell that they've studied these shows. I mean, there's this one scene in that where the camera is sitting by the face of Pietro, and like they're in the background, and you like his eyes open and he's messing with him, and that's like, God,
classic.
They did that shot all the time.
Yeah.
On 90s kid shows, like they did all. It's just you felt right at home like immediately.
Yeah.
I'm loving the mystery too. I have no idea, like there's so many theories about what's going on. I won't even get into all this with you because I've been listening to a podcast that dives into them in so much detail. It's absurd. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot of detail here. There's a lot of mystery here. And I think it's fun mystery. It's not the kind of Westworldian mystery where it's just like so overbearing that you can't enjoy anything in the story because like of the mystery. I will say my one complaint about the way the show is shaping up is we've got Wanda so mixed and embroiled into the mystery of what's happening that I feel like we don't get a lot of her interiority.
Yeah.
Because we're keeping her at such arm's length. I mean, we kind of understand now that while she does have control of this thing, she is not the one that started it. That something is probably using her.
Yeah.
But because we're kind of keeping that close to the chest, like Wanda is suffering. Like she is grieving and brokenhearted. And I feel like the structure of the show is such that I haven't been able to feel that yet at all, really. And that's disappointing to me because I want to feel that. I want the show to really focus on her and her grief and what she's going through. And hopefully maybe by the end of that, this is all just a thing that's a wall or a screen that's been being put between her and her grief. And so we get those moments of interiority. Hopefully it doesn't devolve into a big giant battle. Hopefully we get these a moment for Elizabeth Olsen, who's just a fantastic actress, to really just sit there in the grief and to feel it. I'm praying that's what we get. I haven't felt it yet.
I'm sort of gonna just go ahead and predict that is what's going to happen. Like we're going to get a big moment where we just face it head on, or she faces it head on, and like that has to be the catharsis of the show. Like if that's not the catharsis of the show, then I don't know what they're doing with this show. And I'm pretty sure it is, because it's not exactly subtle that like the theme of the show is grief and loss. Mm-hmm. I mean, even the the side character, the sword agent, lost her mother, and she's also grieving, and she also hasn't faced her grief, not really.
Yeah, and she's turned into a mutant now.
She's turning into so there's all kinds of shit, and and we've also got the element where like Vision's body is in there, and he's kind of like a magical supercomputer, or maybe that's involved somehow.
There's so many. There's everything in this series means like 6 different things.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about the show was never actually the sitcom. It was the violation of the sitcom for shocking effect. So like you pointed out the moment where the guy starts choking, and literally the way the camera behaves suddenly changes. Like like we're getting shots across the table with like a different focus length that we haven't had any shots like this. We're getting like head-on face shots that we haven't gotten before. Like everything about the way the show works changes, and then it like tries to go back to normal, but all the characters are freaked out and just try to leave as fast as they can. Like I love that. I love little things like the moment where the kids have the dog, and like that whole scene, the them watching the dog is played just like a sitcom, and then she magically creates the collar out of the air, and Vision is like, "What the hell are you doing? You'd use your magic right in front of our neighbor." And then she's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." And he's like, "No, don't worry about it." No, they're like, "No, like people are gonna get what the hell is going on, Wanda?" And like his reaction is exactly the way a human being would react in that situation, which clashes so horribly with the sitcom that you're just like, "Oh, this is so weird and uncomfortable now," right? And I love that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting choice to make very clear that all the people that they're being trapped in this thing are suffering horribly.
Yeah.
The show has made that very clear. Like we see that poor woman who's frozen in space with like the tear falling down her cheek. The one guy that a Vision has released is horrified and like conscious and aware. And like, my mother's sick. I need to like, this is bad. It's real bad. And Vision doesn't know what to do. And I really didn't think that's what they were gonna do with the Vision character. And I agree with you that like every complaint I have about not feeling the interiority of Wanda, I'm getting the interiority of Vision in a way I did not expect, and I'm really loving it. He is so confused and confounded and doesn't know what to do.
Yeah,
he's at odds between his love for Wanda and his and knowing that he has to do the right thing. And we learned this time that like his memory has been selectively erased too, right? He doesn't know what the Avengers are. He doesn't remember being a hero.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what I loved about the last episode is like you remember like, oh, this is Vision. This is the guy who can pick up Thor's hammer. This is a guy who just, or you know, a creature, if you will, where the kind of the point of him is that he just is a hero. And so he's going to try to do the right thing, even if it's, you know, going against what Wanda wants and is going to be awkward and uncomfortable for him. I love it.
I just can't get over the fact that this is the thing that they started their whole next phase with. Like, I understand that this is a multi-billion-dollar company and like riskiness really doesn't factor in with them anymore. But like, this is a crazy thing to make. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Like, to sell this to Marvel fans as like, oh yeah, it's just a bunch of old sitcoms and then the stuff you like is going to be mixed in with it is so wild to me. And
Yeah.
I know this isn't the way they originally had it planned and COVID messed all that stuff up, but Falcon and the Winter Soldier seems like such a much more typical entry point. It just seems like that is going to be a show that is just MCU distilled down to episodic content, where this is trying to do something so different, and I respect the hell out of it.
Right. I mean, this feels more like the Twilight Zone. If you know, I mean, it is actually.
I think it's literally based off a Twilight Zone episode.
Yes, it is the Jack in the Box Homer Simpson bit. I don't remember the name of the episode. You know what I'm talking about. And it's a whole show based on that because it's a great premise anyway. So.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm really, really enjoying it. How do you feel about the expanded universe connotations of the character of Pietro being quote unquote recast as a character from the Fox version of X-Men?
I mean, I'd be fine if it was just a one-off joke, and they never ever revisited it again. I would be totally fine with that. Just to be like, haha, it's Quicksilver, and then we move on. It would be amusing if they were like, and this is how we somehow introduce the parallel dimension that has X-Men in it, and now there's X-Men. I don't know if I don't remember whether there's any plan for there to be X-Men in the MCU or not. I have no recollection of this.
They have said yes eventually, but they've said it's far off.
Okay.
That's what Kevin Feige has said. The funny thing about this is we're having this conversation. When this happened, I was shocked to find that my reaction to it was exhaustion. And I am so in on all this connected universe stuff. I'm so in on it, but I just didn't care. Like, I was as shocked as everyone else when I saw the Quicksilver from X-Men, and I laughed in the same way that I think they wanted everyone to laugh because it's such a fun, hilarious idea. And then I was just like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Like, I don't want to talk about how they're going to, like, there's all these rumors about, okay, so like when you pass through the hex, you change. And so maybe that's what the mutation is that's how mutants are going to be around, that like the hex is literally mutating genes and that's going to make mutants. And so Wanda's going to create the mutants. And that's I don't actually care. What I actually care about is Wanda and the Vision and what's going on emotionally with those two characters. That's the part that I care about. And I understand this is part of the show and it's part of the fun, and I'm not going to begrudge anyone the fun, but I was so surprised at myself that my response to this was just, I'm really tired. And maybe I'm just growing up and getting older, and I just don't care about that stuff as much anymore.
It's kind of I think it's kind of funny because I feel like I used to be way more like there have been so many podcasts. You could go through our Doofcast and make a supercut of me rolling my eyes at something that Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, etc. was planning on doing. Oh, a Mandalorian TV show. My God, they're just really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, aren't they? And then it's like my favorite Star Wars thing ever, right? And like this, I'm pretty sure that when like there was probably an episode where you just like read off all of the things that they were going to do for the MCU next phase, and I was like, WandaVision, what the hell is that? That sounds like nonsense. I'm like, no, I'm loving it so far. Like, I think I'm just like, I trust these people to put storytelling first, and all of the frippery and connected universe shit is there. It's there, and it's kind of cute and fun if you pay attention to it, but you don't actually have to, because the core storytelling of each individual thing is going to be relatively solid.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I'm going to continue to watch these shows. I'm going to continue to enjoy them, I'm sure. But I think it was, for me, a moment where I was just like, oh, this part with the expanded universe and all the comic book connections and all that stuff, and figuring out what all this means and what does it mean that Wanda's going to be in the Doctor Strange sequel. What is that like? I just realized that I've gotten to the point in my life where I don't care about that stuff anymore. And it's not that caring about that is stupid. I don't think that. I felt in that moment, this isn't for me anymore, and I'm okay with that. And I'm tired of thinking about those things, and I'm just going to let other people do it.
Yeah.
You know? And I was just kind of surprised about that, but it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have no like real desire to like talk about the expanded universe connections of this show. I just want to talk about how the show works on its own merits.
So we will continue to do that. There's 3 more episodes of the show this season, Matt, and I think they are all an hour long each. So they're like really, the episodes are regularly about 35 minutes. I think they're going to be closer to an hour as they wrap up the season, but 3 more to go. So maybe we'll circle back around once season 1, or I don't think there's going to be multiple seasons. Once this thing is done, we'll circle back around to it and see how we felt at the end.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, that is all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on Pacific Rim, on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or on Disney Plus's WandaVision, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. And if you like what we do here and want to support us monetarily, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, and you can give at the $5 level or any of our levels to help support us, help ensure we keep making shows, keep the lights on, and all that good stuff. This Friday, today, as you are listening to this, we are going to be doing our monthly Doof and Chill session. That's where we just kind of hang out on a stream for a couple hours and play some games with our patrons. So if you were thinking about becoming a patron at that $5 level, but haven't pulled the trigger yet, now would be a pretty good time because you can hang out. We're going to play some Jackbox games tomorrow, and it's going to be fun times. So head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and sign up, and then you'll see information on how to join us for that.
Yeah, those are always a blast.
Mm-hmm.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts, because every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, we will see you all next week when we chat about the penultimate film in our Del Toro journey. We're talking about Crimson Peak.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.